Hey, welcome or welcome back to my channel where I make videos about my own experience as a late diagnosed autistic human being from France with childhood trauma and now chronic illness as well, which is great. We love that. It's about 11:30 in the morning right now. I've been up for about an hour and a half and I thought I would try, instead of like doing my usual approach, which is to record an entire video in one go, I thought, why not just record it in little chunks that will make it not as tiring for me, and I can still, make something that is meaningful to me and get my thoughts out there, but without worsening my current state. So I'm in bed, as you can probably tell, and I've been in bed for the last few days, a little less than a week. I'm sleeping 10 to 11 hours a night at the moment and still don't have the energy to do much during the day. I spend most of my time in bed, except in the afternoon where I transition to the bathtub and I have a bath just for a bit of a change of scenery, and because it's relaxing and comforting, and it allows me to wash myself instead of taking a shower, because showers are too costly for me at the moment. Any type of like being upright, like standing, walking, is too much. So I spend most of my time lying down completely or like semi-reclined. My partner has been doing everything because I can't do anything. And it's not the first time I'm experiencing this. I've had multiple other crashes in the last year and a half that were similar to this. This is the third one, at least, I think. I've had other smaller crashes, but this is the third one where I have to stay in bed for multiple days in a row. The first time I had this, I was in bed for 3 weeks straight, and like I said, I'm not bed bound completely. Like I get up to go to the loo, to brush my teeth, to open and close the window, but most of the stuff my partner has to do, so like making us food, looking after the cats, all the things that need doing around the house, I can't do any of that stuff when I'm in one of those crashes or flare-ups or whatever. For a long time I thought, it's just autistic burnout, I'm not pacing myself right, I'm not recovering right, I'm pushing too hard when I have more energy, and this is why I have those crashes once in a while. But now I'm slowly coming to a conclusion that it has more to do with like chronic illness than just autistic burnout. And I've been exploring MECFS these last few days, like chronic fatigue syndrome. The ME, I can't remember what it stands for. It's such a complicated word. I've been talking about my POTS symptoms, dysautonomia, orthostatic intolerance symptoms in the last few months on my channel. I made several videos talking about it, but I didn't really explain like those ups and downs, those sort of flare-ups that I've been experiencing, where I'll go weeks or months where I have more energy. Like I'm never, like in the last year and a half, my energy has never been back to the way it was before. But I have times when I have more energy, and so I do more things and I'm more active, and those can last a few months, and then I have another crash. And so that couldn't really be explained by just POTS, and it doesn't really fit the typical pattern of autistic burnout. But it is confusing because you hear all these things, autistic burnout recovery is not linear, and if you do too much too quickly, you'll have a relapse. And so I thought that was what I was experiencing this whole time. And because I didn't really have another explanation, I just stuck to that. And to be honest, there was an element of fear, not wanting to consider the possibility that it might be a chronic illness, because that was scary to me. I think it would be scary to anyone. And also there was a level of ignorance. I wasn't informed enough on chronic illness and like chronic fatigue syndrome and all these things. So I did not recognize the signs, but it was always kind of at the back of my mind because I had multiple people suggest it in my comment section, saying like, hey, this looks a lot like ME/CFS or chronic fatigue syndrome, blah, blah, blah. And I actually considered it a few times. Like, I remember as early as a year ago when I was in this same situation, I was in a crash a year ago in November. I was already, doing research on chronic fatigue syndrome because, I was already thinking about it at the time. But it was hard to wrap my head around it because it is kind of like, in my opinion, it's kind of hard to understand what it is exactly, what it looks like. And so all these terms were like very confusing to me, and I was like, I don't think that that's what I have, but you never know. But I was prioritizing other possibilities, let's just say. And so I stuck with the label of autistic burnout for a long time, and maybe there was an element of autistic burnout in there at the start. I don't know, but I don't think that is still 100% the answer. I think that even though burnout recovery can be very slow and non-linear, I don't think I would still be experiencing those such strong relapses by now with all the resting that I've been doing. I think I should see more obvious improvements by now if it was just burnout. So I've been considering the possibility that I might have some form of dysautonomia for a few months, and the thing that triggered that thought process was my orthostatic intolerance, my difficulty to stay upright, difficulty standing for long periods of time, even sitting upright when I'm at my lowest is a lot, and that constant need to be horizontal, to be lying down. Also, another indication of POTS or dysautonomia that I noticed is, of course, like the number one sign of POTS, which is my heart rate going up significantly upon standing, stabilizing at that heightened rate for 10 minutes, and then going back down when I lie down again. Whereas if you don't have POTS, typically your heart rate will rise slightly, not as dramatically. For POTS, it's an increase of at least 30 beats per minute, and then it will go back down after a while once your body has adjusted to your new position. But in POTS, because you have a lower blood volume and stuff, your heart has to work harder to pump the blood to your head, and that is often accompanied by other symptoms like dizziness, fainting, and fatigue. I don't have so much of the dizziness, and I've never fainted, but I did experience pre-syncope when I was younger. I had a few phases in my life where I would feel dizzy or experience pre-syncope upon standing, but it is not something that I experience anymore. It's not necessary to experience dizziness and or fainting to be diagnosed with POTS, but it is such a common symptom that I was like, okay, that's interesting. But the fatigue elements tied to like being upright, but it still didn't explain those crashes that I have every once in a while, where I'll be bedbound for days or weeks like this. And so because POTS or autistic burnout alone didn't really explain it, that's why I turned my attention to ME/CFS. And again, I knew almost nothing about it. So I've been really looking into it more seriously, more in depth these last few days. And again, I don't have any certainty. I don't have a formal diagnosis, but it would make a lot of sense. I still have a few things there where I'm like, oh, I don't know. But I feel like I'm getting closer to having answers. But the main things that make me think that it could be ME/CFS is, well, that pattern of crashes, flare-ups, and just the diagnostic criteria for ME/CFS is significant chronic fatigue that lasts more than 6 months, that significantly impacts your life, which check, definitely. That cannot be explained by anything else. So it's kind of like a diagnosis that's given once every other possibility has been considered and like ruled out. And I have already ruled out anemia and thyroid issues as a possible explanation. And the other things that could mimic ME/CFS, I don't think I have, because I don't have the other symptoms of these things, but you never know. So the chronic fatigue element, and then there's other things like pain, unrefreshing sleep. No matter how much you sleep or rest, it doesn't really give you your energy back. Because that was the main things where I was really confused about what that meant. Because and that's my autistic rigid thinking getting in the way. Because for a long time, the one reason why I didn't consider ME/CFS seriously was that I misunderstood what that meant. I was like, well, if rest and sleep don't help, then I just didn't understand how that. I was like, how would you ever recover from anything if you can't rest? Like, it just felt very confusing in my head. But it is definitely what I'm experiencing, because like I said, I'm sleeping 10-11 hours a night at the moment, and I wake up feeling like I slept 2-3 hours. I don't know. It never feels like I'm fully rested or refreshed or anything like that. Another diagnostic criteria for ME/CFS, which was also something I was like, interesting, is orthostatic intolerance. But yeah, the orthostatic intolerance can be part of ME/CFS from what I understand. So I was like, that might explain the dysautonomia symptoms that I've been having, that orthostatic intolerance, that need to be horizontal all the time. So those were the main things where I was like, Alright, making the most of the fact that my partner is in town to record another snippet of this video. I was finally able to wash my hair yesterday with a little bit of help from my partner. I did not really have it in me to do it myself, so my partner kind of helped, but halfway through it, my autism was like, nope, we have to do this ourselves, we have to be in control, we have to do this the way we usually do it. And I was kind of freaking out, and I just don't like it when I'm not in control, when I'm not doing things myself. So I just ended up washing my hair mostly myself, but with a little bit of help from my partner. And yeah, that was the main thing I did yesterday, and it was a lot. Just by washing my hair, I could tell that I was like overexerting myself. It's kind of the main reason why I started suspecting chronic illness rather than just burnout, because it's the physical fatigue element for me that did it. You know, people say when you're in autistic burnout, you're experiencing like a lot of fatigue, exhaustion, and that can be physical as well. But it's mostly nervous system dysregulation. So it's mostly a mental fatigue, emotional, and then sensory wise, you can't tolerate much. But it's not typical of autistic burnout to crash after. I use the term crash kind of loosely, right? But it's not typical of autistic burnout to be super exhausted after a 15-minute walk, you know? Especially like maybe if you're right at the start of your burnout, you're still in severe burnout or whatever, maybe. But after a year and a half of resting, that there had to be something else. Like, it feels like it's like bone deep fatigue in every cell of my body, you know? And that thing of feeling almost, especially when I'm in a crash like this, feeling like, I have told my partner in the past, like, it feels like I'm sick even though I'm not. And that's kind of like how ME/CFS is often described by people as like feeling like your body is poisoned, feeling like you have the flu even though you don't. And so yeah, that wasn't typical of autistic burnout either. But it is very difficult to tell the two apart sometimes, especially in the way that autistic burnout is described a lot of the time, because there's a lot of overlap between autistic burnout and ME/CFS, well, especially when you start looking into it, you're like, whoa, it sounds like the same thing, you know? The difference is what triggers it, but even then it can get kind of blurry, you know? And of course, in autistic burnout, you don't have the ups and downs as much as you do in ME/CFS that are caused by like overexertion of any type. But yeah, it's confusing because autistic burnout and ME/CFS both can trigger heightened sensory sensitivities. They can both trigger brain fog and like cognitive difficulties and executive dysfunction and that good stuff. So difficulties focusing, difficulties doing more than one thing at a time, difficulties with short-term memory, difficulties processing information and expressing yourself, communicating. Those are things that are seen in both autistic burnout and ME/CFS. Same thing with the heightened sensitivities. It's difficult sometimes, but of course there are things that are specific to ME/CFS, for example, the orthostatic intolerance that I talked about earlier, and the PEM phenomenon, which is like post-exertional malaise, which is that up and down pattern that I was talking about, which is kind of the defining marker of ME/CFS, and it's basically if you overexert yourself, and overexerting yourself in the concept of ME/CFS. Like, it's not like a healthy person who didn't get enough sleep and then ran a marathon or like traveled to the other side of the earth, and like, no, it's like it can be overexerting yourself in the concept of in the context of ME/CFS, depending on the severity of your illness. It can be as little as washing my hair like I did yesterday, depending on what your baseline is. And so overexerting yourself, and then you have a delayed crash. A few hours to up to 3 days later, you might feel a crash that might last a few hours to a few days to a few weeks. From what I understand, again, like, take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. I've only been researching this for less than a week, so I'm far from being an expert. I'm not even sure that's what I have, but I'm just sharing basically what I've learned and what I understand. But I still have a lot to learn. I'm far from being an expert on this, but yeah, you basically crash after overexerting yourself, and that's what PEM is. And that's where I'm still trying to figure it out, because it's not clear to me what PEM might look like for me, because like I said, I mostly go like for months at a time where I'm feel like I'll have fluctuations during those months. I'm not like super stable, but I'll go months with relatively stable energy levels that allow me to do things, like, you know, to not be bedbound basically. And then I'll feel myself slipping into another crash. That's when I have to spend most of my time in bed for up to a few weeks, you know. From what I understand, that would be what someone would call a crash or a flare-up. I'm not sure yet what the difference is between the two, rather than PEM. And I think it's, again, this is like very new to me and it's all very speculative, but I think in my case I have like the PEM, the post-exertional malaise. I have that without realizing it. Like I'll feel that like I have less energy one day, or like a few hours after doing something, I'll recover quite quickly, or think that I've recovered quite quickly, and then just keep going. And I think it's the cumulative effect of like over a period of a few weeks to a few months doing, like, having these PEM episodes and not fully recovering between each. That kind of, the strain kind of accumulates until you hit a wall and until you crash. and you have to be in bed, and like your body is not giving you a choice, you know? So I think that's what's been happening. I think those crashes like this one are just a consequence of the cumulative effect of like all those times when I overexert myself and I feel tired, but I either push through or I'm able to recover, maybe partially, maybe completely. And that explains why it takes months for me to get into another crash, because it slowly adds up, right? I don't know, I'm no specialist, but that's what I'm thinking. Obviously, I have to change my mindset, because up until now, I was still in the mindset of I just have to wait until my burnout is over and then I can resume my normal activities. Whereas now, I'm slowly accepting that this is my new normal, basically. And I mean, not this like in a crash, but like when I'm not in a crash, the rest of the time, that it's my new normal, my new baseline, and that I need to just learn to live around it and not wait for things to go back to the way they were before, because they might never go back to the way they were before. And that's the part that is really hard to accept for me. MECFS is such an unpredictable illness. Some people recover, some people improve over time, but they still have to be careful. Some people are in remission for years and then have a relapse. Some people get worse and worse and worse, get to a point where they have to be in bed 100% of the time and have a carer 24/7, and they can't live without eye masks and ear defenders, and they have to be tube fed, and like it can get really, really bad. You have a level of control over it, kind of, in the sense that if you pace yourself well, if you listen to your body well, you tend to be able to maybe not necessarily improve it, but at least stabilize it. But there's also people where like they're doing their best and they're still getting worse and worse and worse, and like that's what terrifies me, is that like that unpredictability and that lack of control over the illness and not knowing how it's gonna evolve over time. From what I understand, there's different scales that help you determine kind of like how severe your illness is and how disabled you are, which people use for themselves or for disability benefits. There's a scale that kind of like gives you a percentage of how disabled you are by the illness. So there's like very severe to moderate to mild, if I'm not mistaken, and then it recovered. And so I think I oscillate between severe to moderate and moderate, not being able to work, obviously, not being able to leave the house much, needing mobility aids, needing lots of rest, not being able to stand or walk for long periods of time or long distances, needing assistance with daily things like cooking and self-care and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand, I think, in terms of severity at this point in time. I'm very aware that like things can get worse if you don't pace yourself well enough. It is something I'm gonna take very seriously, but I am atrocious at pacing. And I've seen people say that something that can make pacing really difficult is complex PTSD. So I've even seen people say on Reddit that like their complex PTSD made them go into the severe or very severe category. And that is scary to me, because I have complex PTSD. Someone in the comments under my short that I made recently about this was saying that studies have shown that people with childhood trauma are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop some form of, MECFS later in life. And it just makes sense to me, when I think about my life, knowing that like I was basically in a constant state of fight or flight from being abused by my family. And also on top of that, I was an undiagnosed autistic child navigating a neurotypical school system and just social life and everything. it just makes sense that my nervous system is now completely out of whack. Not just my nervous system, but the entire system, you know? Sorry if it's a bit noisy, the window's open. One of the things that were the most striking to me was that exercise is often recommended for autistic burnout. Like, people will say, you know, you gotta move your body and you gotta go on walks and like be in nature, and that typically helps with people who are in autistic burnout. That typically makes them feel better. Whereas anytime I exercised in any way or went for a walk, it would make me feel worse, not better. These last few weeks, I went on a walk almost every day. And even if, like, when I say a walk, I mean a short walk, like maybe 10 minutes. I did like 5-minute sessions on the rowing machine. So we have like a cheap rowing machine at home. I would do stretches on my yoga mat and stuff like that, like gentle yoga poses. And I did that almost every day for weeks. And that's probably one of the things that led to this crash that I'm in right now. So it's almost like you have to rethink everything you know about exercise, physical exercise. None of it works how you've been told it does when you're dealing with chronic fatigue, that is. Like, in the healthy people, obviously it does, but it feels like it's one thing after the other, because I was already struggling a lot with my mental health lately, which I talked about a lot in my last videos. And then this crash hits, and now I'm still struggling with my mental health, but for other reasons, because I clearly don't have the energy to focus on anything trauma related at the moment. So that's all been pushed to the side. But I still struggle with my mood. I struggle with anxiety, because realizing that you probably have a chronic illness that doesn't have a cure, that is probably lifelong and is highly unpredictable and can become incredibly debilitating. That's not good news. That's not the kind of news you want to hear. It's not the kind of realizations you want to have, you know? It's just been overwhelming, trying to do the research on my own, trying to figure it out on my own without exacerbating my symptoms, my fatigue, you know? It's been hard also realizing that I'm in the exact same position that I was in a year ago, around that same time of year, which is my favorite time of year, you know, Halloween and then Christmas. To realize that there hasn't been an improvement in the last year, that I'm at the same point that I was in a year ago. Maybe I'm able to tolerate just a bit more than what I was able to tolerate a year ago, just because back then I was like, the crash that I was in was a consequence of the move and everything, so I was a lot more tired than I am now, but still, I am spending most of my time in bed for more than a week. That's what happened last year at the same time, and it sucks that it's happening at my favorite time of year. And you know, today is Halloween. I had plans, I wanted to do stuff, and those plans have had to be cancelled or readjusted, you know, for my current energy levels, and it sucks. And last year I wasn't able to take part in any of the local festivities for the holidays and Christmas, and you know, I told myself this year I'm gonna do it, and I don't know how much energy I'll have for that, and if it's a good idea for me to go at all, you know. And it's just really frustrating coming to a conclusion that, like, my world is really small and it's not about to get any bigger, and this constant fear of, am I gonna make things worse? Are things gonna get worse? What if I'm not doing it right? But also, you don't want to put too much pressure on yourself or be too anxious, because that also has a cost on your energy. It's just a really bad cycle, really. Right now, I'm hoping that I am simply in a temporary crash, because I pushed too hard in the last few weeks and months and went over my energy envelope a few times too many, and that is the same thing that happened in July and in November last year, and that I will, like, my energy is considerably lower for a few weeks and then goes back up. I'm hoping that this is like, I'm counting on the fact that this is temporary, right? That this is not my new baseline, and that I'll go back to hopefully a level of energy similar to the one I had before this crash. But there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee with this illness. It's so unpredictable. This might be the crash that makes me get worse long time. Maybe this is my new baseline. And that's terrifying to me, having to rethink my whole life around being bedbound. I didn't sleep well last night because I had a lot of anxiety. I still have a lot of anxiety today. I wanted to talk about it now that I'm feeling overwhelmed, so that I'm not only filming the good moments or the less bad moments. I'm not only filming when I feel more energized and regulated, but I'm also capturing the more difficult moments, like right now. I'm struggling with my mood and with anxiety because I'm scared that this is not just a temporary crash and it's like my new baseline and what that would mean. I'm scared because my partner's leaving in 2 weeks to go see his parents, and I'm gonna have to be on my own for a few days, look after myself and the cats. I don't know how much energy I'll have. Every time my partner leaves, I feel super anxious. And yeah, just struggling because my world feels even smaller than it usually does. And it feels like I'm constantly being punished for just existing. I feel trapped inside my body, unable to interact with the world much, and the uncertainty of the future, and just having to rely entirely on my partner as my sole support system. It's just a lot, you know. So yeah, I was struggling a bit emotionally, and I thought I'd pick up the camera and talk about it. It's not easy. It's really not easy. There's a lot of grief, there's a lot of mourning that needs to be done, because you're grieving the loss of freedom, spontaneity, the loss of agency, the loss of autonomy, not being able to plan the future anymore, having to reevaluate everything. The grief of like, I thought I finally had all the answers when I got my autism diagnosis. I thought my life was finally beginning. I was finally going to be able to exist as my full self, and then this chronic fatigue hits shortly after. Yeah, I feel like I'm in a prison, but the prison cell is my own body. Everything is too much all the time. I'm only able to enjoy things in tiny doses, and even then it's easy to overdo it and get into a crash like this. So it's very difficult emotionally. Apparently, chronic fatigue syndrome has one of the lowest level of quality of life of people with chronic illness. I can see why. I know today is a bit more difficult because I didn't sleep well, so that compounds everything. I'm trying to keep that in mind. If you're not familiar with chronic fatigue, you might think, well, what's so terrible about staying in bed all day? And like, you might be imagining a sick day when you have the flu and you get to stay at home and binge movies or whatever. That's not what it is. There's nothing fun about it. Like I said, it feels like punishment. It's not just about physical exertion. You can't overexert yourself, whether that is physical, emotional, mental, sensory. So you can't watch stuff that's too intense, that's too emotional, that is too fast-paced. You have to watch stuff that is calm and soothing, and like, you can't binge movies, you can't do fun things, you can't play tons of games on your phone. Maybe an idle game, a relaxing game, maybe a little bit at a time. You can't read a ton. Like, there's just, it's like nothingness. You can't do shit, or in tiny doses, like I said. And like, it shouldn't be too intense, it shouldn't be too stimulating or whatever. Like, I can't have the blinds fully open because that's too bright. It's just, everything is too much. I can't talk too much with my partner or even to the camera because that's taxing. So you constantly have to like monitor yourself and be like, all right, I'm gonna have to stop that conversation or stop watching this movie or this video, because even though I'm having a good time, it's gonna make me more tired and it's gonna prolong this crash. So you're trying to not make things worse while trying to find ways to keep your mind occupied somehow, because otherwise you feel like you're losing your mind. It's a nightmare, honestly. I wouldn't wish it to anyone. No one would enjoy it unless you like doing absolutely nothing. Maybe you'd like it then, but not for an extended period of time. Like, it might be fun for a day or two, but weeks of this, anyone would struggle with this. It's a freaking nightmare, believe me. So I don't want to jinx anything, but I feel like I am slowly coming out of this crash. For the past couple days, I've been feeling more like myself, if that makes sense. Like I have enough energy to do more than just exist. And I can actually sit upright for longer and tolerate longer conversations with my partner and watch more media without getting overstimulated as quickly. And like yesterday, I even did stretches in bed. Been doing little exercises in bed daily if I can. Some days it was very minimal. It was just a few calf pumps, like when you point and flex your feet repeatedly, turn your ankles one way and then the other, and then clenching your butt and things like that. Exercises that stimulate blood circulation and prevent your muscles from getting too stiff. So I've been doing that almost every day if I had the energy, but like yesterday I was able to do actual stretches in bed, which I hadn't been able to do in the last week. So that was really positive. I was also able to take a bath yesterday for the first time since washing my hair. Washing my hair was actually a really bad idea because even though I really needed it from like a personal hygiene / sensory point of view, like it took me a couple of days to recover from it. But yesterday I was able to take a bath again and just, I don't know, like I said, feeling a bit more like myself, but I'm still very tired, continuing to rest. Also, my sleep is bad again. I go through phases where my sleep is, well, more often than not, my sleep is not great, but I have periods where my sleep is a bit better. And I was kind of like waiting for it to get bad again. The last 3 nights I didn't sleep very well. My issue mostly is not so much that I struggle to fall asleep initially. It's that I tend to wake up multiple times throughout the night, and sometimes I struggle to go back to sleep for a few hours. Like last night, this morning, I was up from 6:30 to 8:30 and then forced myself to wake up around 11:30 because I didn't want to wake up too late, even though I felt super tired, because I don't want to like mess up my sleep schedule. If I wake up too late, it's gonna make it harder to fall asleep tonight and so on. But yeah, not sleeping great, which is also a symptom of chronic fatigue syndrome, because you know your nervous system is out of whack, basically. I have so many things that I would like to talk about. Every day I keep thinking about stuff and I'm like, oh, I should include that in my video or whatever. I should talk about it on my channel, but there is so much stuff that I want to talk about regarding this, like chronic fatigue and stuff, that it would be too much for one video. So I'm just gonna focus on the main points I want to cover, because this video is already getting pretty long. I've barely started editing it. But yeah, the main things that I want to talk about: the cause of my chronic fatigue, what I think triggered it, which is an interesting topic because you often hear about it in the context of viruses. It was made more popular or more like it was talked about more publicly because of COVID, because a lot of people got ME/CFS because of long COVID. But it also happens in a lot of people who didn't get sick for other reasons, like psychological stress. Like I said, trauma can like predispose your nervous system. There can be multiple triggers as well. You know, you can have a predisposition because you're autistic, and so your nervous system is already pretty sensitive, and then you have trauma on top, and then you have a virus and that triggers it or whatever. In my case, I don't think it was triggered by a virus unless I got sick and had no symptoms of the sickness at all. I think looking back, even though I can identify like a starting point of sorts when my energy considerably drops kind of all of a sudden, there were early signs in the months preceding. Like as early as September 2023, so 2 years ago, I already felt myself struggling with feeling more fatigued than usual. I was trying to do like those at-home dance workouts and really struggling with it. They really knocked me out every time. And then my partner and I traveled to Spain, and I could feel that I was getting tired pretty quickly. I kept joking that like I'm an old person in a young person's body because I don't have a lot of endurance and whatever. I also had a lot of like pain in one of my knees. I can't say for sure if it has anything to do with chronic fatigue, but chronic fatigue does cause pain. So what I've been attributing to my hypermobility may just be pain related to ME/CFS, I don't know. From the time that I became an adult, moved out of my parents' house, went to uni and everything, you know, I became a tired person, someone who would get tired easily, it's blah blah blah. As a kid and a teenager, I had so much energy. So much energy. I was never tired. I slept perfectly well. Adulthood really killed me. I know some of it is like autism and not being able to keep up with adult life. But I wonder if over the years, I got slowly more and more tired, and like eventually it tipped into chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't know. All that to say that I don't think there was a clear trigger. I did get COVID, I think, in the summer of 2022. Even though I never tested positive, my partner tested positive and we both had symptoms. So I assumed that I got COVID, but I made a full recovery. Like I said, it wasn't until like spring of 2024, almost 2 years later, that my chronic fatigue really kicked in. But again, maybe I already had, like I said, a predisposition, being autistic, having trauma, was already feeling tired. COVID probably didn't help. Maybe that weakened my body even more. Eventually, you know, with all of the life stressors, getting my autism diagnosis, the death of my great aunt, going no contact with my parents, all of that is a lot and takes a toll. And for me, the toll ended up being chronic fatigue. For a lot of people, it's hard to identify a clear trigger, and it's not really relevant at the end of the day. Science doesn't know yet what really triggers it, like what's the cause. There might be a genetic element. Apparently there are early records of ME/CFS type things going back as far as the 17th century. So we've known about this for a long time, and yet research still lags behind because until COVID made it popular, it only affected, I think, less than 1% of the population. So I guess it wasn't a priority for science, and also there's a lot of medical misogyny that goes into it. For a long time, because it mostly affects women, I think 80% of ME/CFS patients are women. Of course, when something mostly affects women, like endometriosis and stuff, and like AFAB people, it is always dismissed by medical professionals as like, it's all in your head, it's all psychological. When it's something that mostly affects women, it's always assumed that it has to do with psychological stuff, that it's psychosomatic. It's not taken seriously until it has like harmful consequences or it starts affecting men, like with COVID, and then science is like, all of a sudden is like, oh, we should take it seriously then if it starts affecting men. Like, no, we don't want that. Now science is finally like, they're finally looking into it more. But yeah, for a long time it was thought that basically it was women who got sick with something and then developed a fear of like going back to normal life, and so they had to be pushed to exercise more, and they shouldn't sleep too much. They were not allowed to nap. They were like encouraged to keep working or keep going to school. And then we realized that it was actually making things a lot worse because, spoiler alert, it's not psychological. And so that actually did a lot of harm to a lot of people. It made their chronic fatigue worse, sometimes permanently. So now, in the last 10 to 20 years, professionals have stopped, but a lot of them still haven't updated their knowledge or whatever. A lot of them still recommend outdated stuff, like the graded exercise or whatever. But things are starting to change, and like the main thing that is being recommended is pacing and rest and not pushing through because it's psychological, Yet another example of how medical misogyny has done a lot of harm. Alright, I was just editing the video from my bed now that I'm feeling a bit better. I just thought I'd wrap things up and film a conclusion to the video, an outro. There were just a couple more things I wanted to touch on. The first one being, will I get a diagnosis? Do I want to get a diagnosis? Yeah, I do want to get a diagnosis. I think it would be really nice to have certainty. Because I am applying for disability benefits, having a formal diagnosis would be a good thing towards that, and also for my own peace of mind. But I don't really know, to be honest. I have a great GP who knows about autism and stuff, but I only have appointments with her every 6 months or so. And the next one is in April. It's not really possible to get another appointment with her in the meantime, and I kind of regret not having brought it up to her at the beginning of the month when I had my last appointment with her. I was still on to POTS at the time. I hadn't really made the connection to chronic fatigue, but of course I could go to any other GP. It's just, because I have trust in her now. She's the only one I want to deal with, so it's going to take a while for me to have the courage to make an appointment with someone else, not knowing how they're gonna react, or like, things are still very backwards in France. So like, even on the official website, like on the health insurance website or whatever, national health insurance, on the page talking about chronic fatigue syndrome, there is still some very outdated stuff on it. I'm not super excited about bringing it up to a random GP I've never talked before and being dismissed or told like bull crap, or to be dismissed just because I'm AFAB, I don't know. It's just the anxiety. But it would be nice to do any tests that I might need to do, either blood tests or other types of tests, just to rule out anything else, so that I can be certain that what I have is ME/CFS and not something else. Because like I said, it's a diagnosis that you get by ruling out everything else, basically. But we'll see. I will probably figure something out in the next few months. Make an appointment with a GP, and then I'm not sure. I know there are like long COVID clinics in France, so maybe go there, or otherwise maybe a neurologist. I'm not sure. We'll see. But yeah, I'll probably get to that point at some point, because it would be nice to have a formal diagnosis. In the meantime, the last thing I wanted to talk about is accommodations. How do I accommodate my chronic fatigue? And I've already started doing that months ago. Obviously it's not new, because like I said, I've been experiencing symptoms of chronic fatigue for the last year and a half, and so I've already started, accommodating myself. So one of the biggest issues for me is standing and walking for long periods of, and when I say long periods of time, I mean more than a few minutes at a time. One thing I did, which was a really nice, was to get stools. I got a shower stool. That was the first thing I got, because I noticed it was really hard for me to, like, anytime I take a shower, but especially when I wash my hair, because I have a lot of hair and it's very thick. And washing my hair takes maybe half an hour to 40 minutes sometimes, and that's a long time to be standing in a shower, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't do it more often. To be honest, I still don't do it very often, ever, even with the stool, but it helps me save so much energy not having to stand in the shower. So that's the first thing I got. I also got a wheelie stool for the kitchen, because again, standing in the kitchen while I'm cooking, prepping food, so I got a wheelie stool, and it's so convenient that even my partner uses it now when he's in the kitchen. So that's been great. Also, because, like, I've been having really bad pain in my feet. I don't know if it has anything to do with the chronic fatigue or what, but I think because my feet are not used to supporting my weight anymore, my feet get really achy very quickly. So the wheelie stool in the kitchen has been great, also to take the weight off of my feet so that they don't hurt as much. And I also got a collapsible stool, a foldable stool, which is very convenient for when I go outside, and I used it a bunch of times on the walks, and even in town. If there's nowhere for me to sit, I'll whip it out. It's very easy to set up, and it's very sturdy, and it's very lightweight, and it's in a nice little backpack, so I can take it everywhere. It's really convenient. Something else I've been using, especially during this crash, I've been using them every day, is compression socks for multiple reasons. The first one being because of my orthostatic intolerance. It helps to get the blood flowing back to my head. And also because I've been spending so much time in bed, it is recommended to wear compression socks for better blood circulation, to prevent clots and whatnot. So I've been wearing those every day. When I had more energy and I would go into town and stuff, I would wear them as well. To be honest, I can't tell if they make a difference or not. I really can't tell. But one thing that does make a difference, I feel like, especially when I'm in a crash, because I do feel like my orthostatic intolerance symptoms flare up when I'm in a crash, is elevating my feet. Putting my feet up. I do feel like that makes a huge difference. When I'm out of a crash, when I have more energy, I don't feel like it makes a huge difference. So I don't know. I think it's because my dysautonomia symptoms flare up when I'm in a crash, and so I get more benefits from elevating my feet. I don't know. But what I am missing, what would really help, would be something that gives me more mobility. So a mobility aid. Because my main issue is, even when I am at my best, if you will, even when I have more energy, I still can't leave the house much. And when I do, I can't, like I said, I can't walk or stand for very long. And so it's very, very exhausting for me when I go into town, when I go for a walk, when I go out in nature or whatever. It costs me a lot of energy, and then it can trigger a crash. That's why I don't leave the house much. And so I think getting some type of mobility aid would give me more freedom. It would help me leave the house more. If I could do it more often without spending as much energy every time, it would be really good. But I think it's going to take me a while to make a decision and actually do it, because first of all, I'm autistic. I have tons of social anxiety. I already struggle so much just existing as myself in public, feeling self-conscious, people looking at me. But even when there's nothing unusual about how I look, I still have so much social anxiety from, like, people looking at me and stuff. And so the idea of bringing even more attention to myself by using a mobility aid, let's just say that I can't picture it right now at this point in my life, and I don't want to get a mobility aid if in the end I don't leave the house much more than before because I'm fearful of people's gaze. Now, I've heard a lot of people say it's normal to feel this way at the start, but then after you realize how much freedom it gives you, it kind of like subsides. You kind of don't care about it anymore. Maybe that will happen for me. I hope so, but I don't know. At this point, I don't quite feel ready yet. And also, I'm not sure what mobility aid I would like to get, what would be best for me. There are many options. There's walkers or rollators, transport chairs, 2-in-1 rollator and transport chairs. Then there's the classic wheelchair where you can propel yourself. It takes a lot of arm strength to do that. I don't know if I have the arm strength, first of all, and maybe it would cost me way too much energy to propel myself. And also a traditional wheelchair you can't use as a walker or rollator because if there's no one sitting in it, it's not stable. And then the third option is something electric, so some type of scooter, a traditional wheelchair with like an attachment. There are so many options and I don't know what would be best for me. I'm really far from making a decision, but I do think that I will have to do that at some point if I want to regain a little bit more mobility, a little bit more freedom in my life, and consequently increase my quality of life. If I can leave the house more, if I can do more things without overexerting myself and crashing every time, that would be great. But we'll see. Again, I'm still very, very new to all this. The mere thought of like even getting a wheelchair is so new and foreign to me. I never thought that I would find myself in a position to do that. Of course, no one does until it happens to you, you know? Yeah, so I still have a lot to figure out. Thankfully, in France, from what I understand, if you have a prescription from your GP, you can get whatever mobility aid you need covered by insurance. And there are also lots of companies where you can like rent a mobility aid to test it out for a while, so you don't have to commit right away. So there's lots of options, so I have a lot to think about. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Still very new, still very overwhelming. I'm slowly making progress and like getting closer to finding answers and better accommodating myself. All in all, even though it's kind of depressing, it's also a relief because I feel kind of like how I felt when I realized I was autistic. I had that kind of like that aha moment where I was like, this explains a lot of things. And I feel like with POTS, I wasn't 100% sure that was the answer, which is also why I had made a whole video about it that I didn't post in the end, because it's almost like I felt like I didn't have the whole picture. Whereas with chronic fatigue syndrome, now I feel like I have the whole picture. Yeah, I'll make more videos about this in the future. You're not done hearing me talk about this and info dumping about it. Because I talked about my autistic burnout for a year and a half, I now feel kind of bad. If it wasn't autistic burnout in the end, I kind of feel like I might have misinformed people, especially because I have a whole playlist dedicated to that. And so I feel like people watching that being like, oh, this is what I'm experiencing, so what I'm experiencing is also autistic burnout, when maybe they also have chronic fatigue syndrome. I wouldn't want people to like be misinformed and like basically delay them getting the right diagnosis and finding the right solution. So that's why it was especially important for me to make this video, so that I can be like, hey, maybe I was wrong all along, and like if you also experience this, you should definitely look into chronic fatigue syndrome and not just stop at I'm burnt out. Especially if you've been burnt out for years, definitely look into it, see if there's not anything else going on underneath. But I'll stop for now because this video is long enough as it is, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment. That helps me a lot. If you want to support my channel financially, you'll find links in my description to my Ko-fi page. You can donate here on YouTube as well, and I have an Instagram account, links in my description. Also, I've never mentioned it out loud in a video, but it is there if you want to check it out. but I don't post much on Instagram, to be honest. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!